when he showed up at my game, I was like so mad.
The bright lights, the roaring crowds, the million-dollar contracts, these are the symbols of NBA glory, the kind of success most people only dream about. But behind the highlight reels and championship rings, there's another story, a darker story, one that rarely makes it to ESPN or the front page of sports magazines. It's the story of broken homes, abandoned children, and fathers who failed at the one job that mattered most. Despite their dominance on the court, many NBA legends have stumbled catastrophically when it comes to parenting. And tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on some of the most shocking cases of fatherhood gone wrong in professional basketball history. Names you know, names you've cheered for, names that represent triumph and tragedy. Let's start with Larry Johnson, a name that brings back memories of explosive dunks and that iconic Grandmama campaign. He was charismatic, powerful, a force of nature on the hardwood. But off the court, the story was far more complicated. Johnson's personal life was a mess of broken relationships and legal battles that painted a very different picture of the man behind the jersey. He fathered 5 children with 4 different women, including 2 with his wife Celeste. But it was his relationships with the others that exposed the depths of his failures as a father. In 1993, Gabrielle Tyler was born to Angela Jeffress. Johnson was largely absent from the child's life, maintaining minimal contact even as the years rolled by. The courts had to step in, mandating that he pay $4,000 a month in child support. But money doesn't replace a father's presence. And for Gabrielle, that presence was almost non-existent. It's one thing to cut a check every month. It's another thing entirely to show up, to be there for birthdays and school plays, to actually be a parent. Johnson failed that test. Then came 1996, and the birth of Taylor Tate to Laura Tate. This case was even more disturbing. According to reports, Johnson initially begged Laura to have an abortion. When she refused, he allegedly resorted to harassment, making what should have been a joyful time into a nightmare. Think about that for a moment. A woman is carrying your child, and instead of stepping up, you make her life hell. The court wasn't having it. They ordered him to pay $8,850 a month, plus an additional $30,000 a year specifically for a nanny. The message was clear. If he wasn't going to be there, he'd at least have to pay for someone who would be. But even with all his NBA earnings, Johnson found himself drowning financially. By 2015, he filed for bankruptcy, owing a staggering $900,000, primarily to Laura Tate. $900,000. The debt hung over him like a dark cloud until he finally settled by transferring an $800,000 home and $55,000 in cash. By 2021, his debts were cleared, but the damage to his relationships with his children? That couldn't be erased with a check or a house deed. The irony is brutal. Johnson was responsible with some of his children, but negligent with others, proving that even within one man, fatherhood could be both a commitment and a complete failure. It raises the question, how do you choose which children deserve your love and which don't? Chris Bosh, 11-time All-Star, NBA champion, Hall of Famer. But before all the glory with the Miami Heat, Bosh was embroiled in a custody and child support nightmare with his ex, Allison Mathis, over their daughter Trinity. And this battle, it got messy. In 2009, Mathis came forward claiming that Bosh had abandoned her while she was pregnant. She sought high child support payments, arguing that he had the means and the responsibility. But the case quickly became complicated by a legal jurisdiction dispute, eventually being moved to Texas. The court ultimately ordered Bosh to pay $2,600 a month, but to his credit, he provided voluntary payments, insurance, tuition, and even set up a college fund for Trinity. On paper, it looked like he was doing the right thing. He was checking all the boxes that a responsible parent should check. But behind closed doors, the custody conflicts were brutal. Bosh actually sued to prevent Mathis from appearing on the reality show Basketball Wives, worried about how it would affect their daughter. Meanwhile, access disputes limited him to just 22 hours a month with Trinity, far less than the 12 days he wanted 22 hours. That's less than a single day. Imagine being a father and having to schedule your time with your own child like you're booking an appointment at the DMV. It's not just a logistical nightmare, it's an emotional one. Every minute becomes precious when you're rationed like that. Finally, in 2014, they reached a settlement through mediation. Today, Bosh is reportedly an active father with his wife, Adrienne Williams, and emphasizes his commitment to all his children. It's a redemption arc, sure, but one that came only after years of bitter conflict and a daughter who had to witness it all. The question lingers, could it have been different if they'd put Trinity first from the beginning? Royce White's story is a tragedy on multiple levels. His NBA career was cut short, derailed by mental health struggles that were well documented. Anxiety, depression, the pressure of professional sports, combined with personal demons. But what's less talked about is his repeated non-compliance with child support obligations, a pattern pattern that paints him as yet another cautionary tale. Between 2020 and 2023, White missed payments, racking up arrears that exceeded $100,000. $100,000. The legal consequences were severe. He faced up to 180 days in jail. He managed to avoid that fate by making payments, but the damage was done. Some of the mothers of his children dispute his claims of compliance, noting his minimal involvement in their lives. It's a painful reminder that even when someone is struggling with their own demons, the children still suffer. Mental health challenges are real, and they deserve empathy and understanding. But so are the responsibilities of fatherhood. And in White's case, one didn't excuse the failure of the other. His children didn't ask to be born into this situation, and they certainly didn't deserve to be neglected because their father was fighting battles of his own. Jimmy Walker was the #1 draft pick in 1967, a golden boy with a bright future. The world was at his feet, but his legacy off the court is defined by one staggering statistic. He fathered up to 13 children with 11 different women. 13. Let that sink in for a moment. 11 women. 13 lives brought into this world. And how many of them truly knew their father? One of those children was Jalen Rose, who would go on to become an NBA star in his own right. But Jalen's childhood was marked by the absence of the man who gave him life. His mother, Jean Rose, was pregnant when Walker moved on, leaving Jalen to grow up without knowing his father. That void fueled him. Jalen has spoken openly about how he was motivated to succeed in basketball, partly to gain his father's attention, to make him notice, to make him proud, to make him see him. Think about the psychology of that. A child working his entire life, pushing himself to excellence, all in the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, his father will finally pay attention. He became part of Michigan's legendary Fab Five, one of the most iconic college basketball teams in history, and still, the recognition he craved from his father remained elusive. Later in life, Walker expressed regret and tried to connect with Jalen. He reached out, tried to build bridges that should have been built decades earlier, but by then, the damage was done. You can't undo decades of absence with a phone call or a handshake. You can't replace a lifetime of missed moments with apologies and explanations. Jalen Rose's story is a testament to resilience, to the power of the human spirit to overcome abandonment and thrive anyway. But it's also a damning indictment of a father who was nowhere to be found when it mattered most. Dwight Howard, Superman, 8-time All-Star, one of the most dominant centers of his generation. But when it comes to fatherhood, the cape comes off, and what's underneath isn't pretty. Howard has 5 children with 5 different women, and the allegations of neglect and selective engagement are impossible to ignore. Royce Reed, the mother of one of his children, called him evil and neglectful, painting a picture of a man who was more interested in his image than his responsibilities. Evil, that's a strong word. The kind of word you don't use lightly about the father of your child.
Okay, so then you give birth. Was Dwight there during the birth?
No. He knew I was in the hospital. I texted him, called him. My parents called his parents. And he was playing in a game, actually, like that day. And he didn't come that night, the next day, nothing. But we sent his parents a picture. And from then, they were like, oh, that's our grandson. He looks just like him. And then they sent a picture back of Dwight when he was born. And it was like they were twins.
Tiffany Render, another mother, criticized his legal maneuvers aimed at reducing child support payments and noted his inconsistent involvement in their child's life. It's a pattern. Show up when it's convenient, disappear when it's not. In 2014, there were even child abuse allegations investigated, though they were never substantiated. Still, the fact that such allegations existed at all speaks volumes. Where there's smoke, there's often fire. Or at the very least, there's enough dysfunction to warrant serious concern. Howard has denied being a deadbeat dad. He insists that he provides financially and is occasionally present personally. He's even acknowledged that he needs to improve. But acknowledgement without action is just empty words. It's PR spin. It's damage control. And for the mothers who've had to fight him in court, and for the children who've had to wonder why their father isn't around, those words don't mean much. Actions speak louder, and Howard's actions have told a story of a man who puts himself first. Jason Caffey won 2 NBA championships with the Chicago Bulls. He tasted glory. He stood on the podium with Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. He had it all. But off the court, Caffey fathered 10 children with 8 different women, and his financial and emotional failures as a father are almost impossible to comprehend. At one point, his child support arrears exceeded $300,000, $300,000 in unpaid obligations. He lost almost all of his $34 million in career earnings. $34 million. Gone. Squandered. Disappeared into the void of bad decisions and irresponsibility. But the money isn't even the worst part. Money can be earned back. What can't be earned back is time. Caffey had long estrangements from many of his children, and he justified his absences by pointing to disputes with their mothers, as if that somehow made it okay, as if the children weren't the ones paying the price for adult conflicts they had nothing to do with. But here's where the story takes a turn. Kafi eventually went to therapy, and what he discovered was heartbreaking. His behavior was driven by a desperate desire for love. He was filling a void, trying to find something he'd never had. Maybe it was affection, maybe it was validation, maybe it was connection. Whatever it was, he sought it in all the wrong places, and his children bore the burden of his brokenness. And once he understood that, he started to change. He looked in the mirror, confronted his demons, and decided to do better. Today, he maintains decent relationships with his children and has dedicated himself to educating young people through speaking engagements and a book he travels around, sharing his story, warning others not to make the same mistakes. It's a redemption story, but one that came far too late for the kids who grew up without him. They didn't get the father they deserved when they needed him most. Karl Malone, the mailman, one of the greatest power forwards in NBA history, second on the all-time scoring list, a two-time MVP. But his story off the court includes one of the most disturbing allegations on this entire list. At the age of 20, Malone allegedly fathered a child with a 13-year-old girl. 13, a child herself. He was never criminally charged, which raises its own questions about justice and accountability. But that wasn't his only complicated relationship with his children. Malone also fathered twins, Daryl and Cheryl Ford. Initially, he denied paternity, denied his own children, but over time, he gradually built a bond with them. Better late than never, some might say. Others would argue that denial at the beginning sets a tone that's hard to shake. One of his sons, Demetrius Bell, went on to become an NFL offensive lineman, successful despite growing up with a father who wasn't fully present. Bell made something of himself, not because of Malone, but in spite of him. Malone's case is a stark reminder that fame and success don't exempt anyone from moral accountability. The mailman always delivered on the court. Rain or shine, he showed up. But as a father, the deliveries were late, incomplete, and sometimes never arrived at all. Shawn Kemp was a powerhouse in the 1990s, known for his ferocious dunks and athletic dominance. The Rain Man, he played above the rim with a fury that made him one of the most exciting players to watch. But off the court, he fathered at least 7 children with 6 different women, and the weight of that responsibility took a toll on every aspect of his life. To his credit, Kemp consistently paid child support, even though the financial strain was immense. By 2015, his aggregate payments exceeded $100,000 a month. $100,000 every single month. That's more than most people make in a year. Let that number sit with you for a second. And the stress of juggling those obligations affected his professional performance. His career, once so promising, was weighed down by the chaos of his personal life. It's hard to focus on basketball when you're managing relationships with 6 different women and trying to be present for 7 children scattered across different households. Kemp had multiple marriages, including 3 children with his first wife, and some of his sons went on to play college basketball, following in their father's footsteps. But in 2025, he made headlines again, this time for being placed on electronic monitoring following a shooting incident. The details were murky, the circumstances unclear, but it was another reminder that Kemp's life off the court has been anything but smooth. In statements, he highlighted his concern for his children, a reminder that even now, decades later, the complexities of his parenting choices continue to haunt him. He's still trying to navigate the consequences of decisions he made decades ago. Larry Bird, legend, icon, one of the greatest to ever play the game, 3-time NBA champion, 3-time MVP, but even legends can fail as fathers. Bird had a strained relationship with his biological daughter, Corey, while being far more engaged with his adopted children. The contrast is painful and impossible to ignore. Bird set up a bank account for Corey, providing financial support. He made sure she had money, but beyond that, minimal involvement, especially in the early years. He wasn't at the recitals. He wasn't at the graduations. He wasn't there for the everyday moments that define a parent-child relationship. Money can't replace a father's love, and Corey felt that absence deeply. She's spoken about it in interviews, about what it was like to see her father celebrated everywhere, to know he was a hero to millions, and yet to feel invisible to him. Over time, there was a gradual reconciliation, starting in her teens and continuing into adulthood. Small steps, phone calls, maybe a dinner here and there. Today, their relationship is described as cordial, but not deeply close. It's better than nothing, but it's far from what a daughter deserves from her father. Bird's story is a reminder that even the greatest champions can drop the ball when it comes to the people who matter most. You can win every game on the court and still lose at home. Dennis Rodman, the Worm. Eccentric, unpredictable, unforgettable. He dyed his hair every color imaginable, dated Madonna, wore a wedding dress to promote his book. He was chaos personified. He had 3 children from 2 marriages, but it's his daughter, Trinity Rodman, who has been the most vocal about his failures as a father. And what she's had to say, it's heartbreaking. Trinity has publicly criticized Rodman, describing abandonment, family homelessness, and neglect during the years following her parents' divorce. She's spoken about what it was like to struggle, to not know where the next meal was coming from, to wonder where her father was while he was off being Dennis Rodman, the celebrity she felt invisible to the man who was supposed to protect her. In interviews, she's been candid about the pain, about how his absence shaped her, about how she had to grow up faster than any child should have to. Rodman eventually apologized, admitting that he struggled to break the generational cycle of absent fatherhood. His own father wasn't there for him. He had dozens of children and abandoned them all, and Rodman found himself repeating that pattern with his own children, despite knowing the pain it causes. It's a painful legacy. Rodman's story illustrates how the sins of the father can be passed down, how trauma can ripple through generations like a stone thrown into still water. He's trying now, reaching out, attempting to repair what's been broken. Why dad had time for everyone else, but not for them. These stories aren't just about basketball, about the uncomfortable truth that you can be a hero to millions and a villain to the people who share your DNA. Because at the end of the day, no amount of fame or fortune can replace the presence of a parent. No championship ring can fill the void left by an absent father. And these men, legends in their sport, icons of an era, will forever be remembered not just for their triumphs, but for the families they left behind, for the children who deserved better, for the lives that were shaped by absence rather than presence. That's the real legacy, and it's one that can never be erased.